Alright, so I'm working on to Paris here, and I'm playing the historical scenario, which starts on turn 2. I've completed the setup. As you can see here, there's a lot of different corps and armies there on the board. They are, sorry about the glare here. They are all tracked, which you can't really see on these army cards, and then the corps cards here. Sorry, the sun is blazing in through the window here. The corps cards here show you the strength of each of the individual corps, and then the army cards show you which of those corps are attached to which armies. Armies that are not actually attached, or corps that are not actually attached to an army, are moving independently with their own leaders. However, you can do during the resource phase, you can determine which corps are attached to which armies, so you can kind of switch everything around as you need to, but only during a certain part of the turn, which is the resource phase. And then you've got your force pool cards here that have various nationality specific charts and tracking and tables and so forth. So currently we are in the resource phase, and this is the point at which you determine the number of command points. Well, first you allocate your logistics points. I think that's what they're called. They're resource logistics markers, which are these guys here. So you have your tertiary command, primary command, somewhere there, secondary command, and the Prussians have the same thing: primary, secondary, and tertiary. And you place those to determine where you can spend your command points for that turn. And you'll have a certain number of command points in each of these commands to spend. And each of these commands has a certain range to them. So I think for the Prussians it's 5 hexes, and for the French it's 4 hexes. So as you can see here, I may have put my Prussian commands too close together. I probably wanted to put something down there within range of that guy. Although at the moment the Prussians are so tightly grouped that I don't think it matters a whole lot where you put your primary, secondary, and tertiary resource logistics markers. So during the game you'll actually place these face down so your opponent won't know where you're allocating the most of your command points to, because the way it works out, depending on what you roll, you'll end up with more command points for your primary, slightly fewer for your secondary, and even fewer for your tertiary. So your tertiary is where you want to, you want to spend the least number of command points. Primary where you want to spend the most. So for the French, I did want to give these guys some points over here to be able to move up and mobilize closer to the combat. Although I need to read the special rules. Those may be one of the units there that can only move by rail on the first turn. There's some movement restrictions for the French because they mobilized poorly historically. Anyway, I've placed the primary, secondary, and tertiary resource logistics markers. And now we go through the process of rolling for each side and checking on the command point table to see where or how these points are actually going to be, how many points are actually going to be allocated to each of the primary, secondary, and tertiary areas. So if you've played victory games, the Civil War before, you'll recognize this instantly. This is a slightly different variant of what the Civil War does, which has your points grouped by theater, whereas here there is no theater. You have one theater, which is France, for the Franco-Prussian War, but you're determining which areas of the front you're going to be allocating most of your command points to. So go ahead and roll. For the Germans, we roll a 7. Then you refer there to your command point table right here. And as you can see, a 7 gives 8 primary command points, 7 secondary, 4 tertiary, and 4 discretionary. So 8, 7, 4, 4. And what you do is you use these guys here, these little tracker markers here, and you place them on the general records track for the number of points that will be allocated per area. So already I can see that being a problem of having too many markers on the general records track. That's not a problem in victory games of the Civil War because they have the most awesome trackers on the map. And they have different columns for each different thing that you have to track. And you would think it would be cumbersome and overbearing, but it's actually very handy and very easy to keep track of. Unlike this general records track, where you're just going to have piles of counters tracking all kinds of different things, and you're going to have to keep them all straight in your head as much as you can, which is just, I can see it getting too crowded and confusing very quickly. Nonetheless, we will soldier on. So we had 8, 7, 6, 8, 7, and 4, and 4 for the tertiary, and then there's discretionary command points. Those can be used in any particular zone. Now we roll for the French, and they roll a 4, which gives them 8 primary command points, 6 secondary command points, 4 tertiary command points, and 5 discretionary command points. So as you can see, the die roll does not, like a lower die roll does not necessarily mean lower total numbers. The numbers kind of shift around. You can see here on the chart. If you roll a 2, you actually get quite a few primary command points, but you sort of get burned on the secondary and tertiary command points. Although, well, most of the secondary is 6. There's only a couple of secondary command points that give you a 7. So that's actually 7 is the max you can get for secondary. 5 is the max you can get for tertiary. But 5 is the max you can get for discretionary. And on a roll of 4, I happen to get that for the French. So it's an interesting chart there. But anyway, and also very similar to victory games, Civil War chart, where the numbers kind of jumped around regardless of what you rolled. So now that we have rolled for the command points, the next part of the resource phase, and this is a pretty good sequence of play on here because it gives you the rules citations for each thing that you're doing, which I like. But in the resource phase, you can see here we just did the both players determine command SPs and attachments. Now we move to the action phase. Actually, it's once all placed, both reveal all markers, which I already did because I'm playing solo, and then roll for command points. And then both players determine contained strength points and attachments. So this is where you get to determine what cores are attached to which armies, and what strength points are attached to which cores. Are they attached to a core, are they attached to an army, or are they just on the map? So you can do all of your strength point command allocation and so forth only during this part of the phase. So then we move on to the action phase, which we do here. Moving from the resource to the action phase. So you've got this thing that keeps track of what phase of the turn you're in. Now we roll for initiative, which you can see here. Step 1, both players roll 3d6 for initiative. And then here, much like victory games of Civil War, if it's a tie, you can either get more command points or the turn might end. So that's one of those things in the Civil War, sometimes you'd end up with just way more command points than anybody could actually use. Other times the turn would end before people got to do what they wanted. So anyway, this is basically a contested roll, and so the difference is the number of initiative points that must be used this segment by both players, and then the player that rolls higher goes first with that number of points. So we'll roll 3d6 for the Germans, and they roll a 6. And the French roll 14. So 14 minus 6 looks a lot like 8. So we have, there's a marker that you can use here that shows the initiative difference. And you'll use that on the general records track to mark how many initiative points everybody has. You just pick the side that wins initiative and put them on there first. So we put 8 points for the French, who have the initiative, and now they can start spending their initiative points for the turn, command points and initiative points until all the initiative points are spent. The player who gets initiative can enter 1 SP at one strength point at no cost, which is nice when you get the initiative. And then the person without initiative will go after that, and you keep repeating that segment until everybody's spent all of the initiative points that they have. So we will get started doing that, and I probably won't walk through that individually because I got to look at the map and determine what I want to do with each side here. But then I'll recap how the points are spent afterwards. All right, I'm trying to walk my way through what I would consider not fairly, but maybe incredibly complex movement rules in this game. Still on the first turn, in the first resource phase, or first activation phase, or action phase. And I've allocated some points here. The secondary command, it's actually in this hex, I've just moved the counter. Secondary command was placed on the Army of Alsace here, which includes the 1st Corps, the 3rd Cavalry Division, and then the 5th Corps, which is over here. I'm not sure, did that also include the 7th Corps? No, 1st, 5th, and 3rd Cavalry Division. So I wanted to move them up here to this space with designs on attacking either the 5th Corps here or the 3rd Army. So I planned on moving them. There's a forest hex side here, which adds a +2, I believe. Look at the terrain effects chart. +1 for a forest hex side. So it costs 2 movement points to enter the space. So the action that I took is to move an army plus attachments. So this allows me to move the Army of Alsace plus the 3rd Cav Division, the 1st Corps, and the 5th Corps. It allows me to move all these attachments. That was 3 command points for a French Corps plus 2 initiative points. So I did that, and then according to combined movement, or coordinated movement, everybody moves at the same time. So for the first movement point, nobody actually moves because it's going to cost these guys 2 movement points to move into here. It's going to cost the 5th Corps, who's going to move up into this forest hex. Or my bad, I think I'm actually going to move him here into whatever the city is, Wissembourg, to join these loose strength points here. He's going to have to cross this rough hex side, which I believe is a +2, which it is. So it's going to cost him 3 to move into Wissembourg. So for the first movement point, nobody does anything because they haven't gotten to the number of movement points they need to actually spend in order to move. So we move to the second movement point for the coordinated movement. He's still stuck here, but these guys all move. So these guys would all move into this space. Ordinarily, because there's 3 units here, there's a cav, a corps, and an army, and I think that involves a congestion penalty. If there are, let's see, if the number of friendly armies and or corps, okay, so, all right, there's a brief interruption there. So what happened here is these 3 units, the Army, the Corps, and the Cav Division, we went through 1 movement point. Nobody moved because nobody's actually spending a movement point to move where they're moving. Nobody's spending a single movement point. These guys are spending 2 to get here. So on the second movement point of the coordinated movement, they'll move to this space, but that allows this 3rd Army here, and I've actually already moved them, so I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. They were all up here, and this allows that army, that German army, to react. the army that's there is the German Third Army. And they have attached to them the Prussian 5th Corps, the 11th Corps, the Bavarian 1st Corps and 2nd Corps, and the 4th Cavalry Division. So you can see you got the 5th Corps here. Now the 4th Cav and the 1st Bavarian Corps are on the other side of a major river, so they cannot react into either of these hexes. And the reaction zone of an army is 2 hexes away, so they can react to movement into this particular space. So what you can do is you can roll for each corps that's within a reaction zone individually, or you can roll for the army as a whole to allow the entire army, all the units within the army, at least those are eligible. These two are not. Well, the 11th Corps is because it's within the zone of influence of the army. So the 11th Corps will get to react because they are on the correct side of the river. So what will happen, or what I ended up doing rather already, I'm kind of, like I said, ahead of myself. The Third Army rolled. So the Third Army is under control of, look over here at our army lists. The Third Army is under Prince Friedrich, who has a reaction of 5. So we need to roll a 5 or a 6 in order for him to be able to react. I ended up rolling a 5, which gives us a 1 hex reaction capability. So that allows all of these units to react to the movement into this hex. So what I think I will end up doing is actually moving up to meet this. I think I accidentally moved. This railhead was here. What I'll end up doing is moving these guys forward to guard the railhead into this hex here. Now, I think, and I'll have to double check this, I believe the secondary command stays where it is. If the Prussians want to move this, they can spend command points and initiative points to do so, and have it move over and join the actual army. I think 5th Corps, I'm going to leave him where he is to sort of hold the line here, because as you can see, this terrain here is fairly rough. You've got rough hex sides, you've got forest. This would be, if the French wanted to try and drive up here, that would be very slow going. So here, you can see those hexes are clear, and you get the railhead here, and that's an important crossing of the Rhine there. Or, I don't know if that's the Rhine or not. I forget what river that is. And it looks like it doesn't say on the map. Regardless, there's a rail crossing here into Germany. So, or not Germany, but Baden over here. So we don't want the French to get up there, possibly threaten that river crossing and get back up here into Baden on the other side of the river, because that'll start wreaking havoc with Prussian supply for the invasion. So we definitely need to guard this space. So we will react into there, and then everybody who's reacted is going to do so. So these French troops now complete their movement. I think, technically you would move them all, each one at a time, into that space, but the way coordinated movement works is they are all, in fact, moving separately. And again, same thing here. Secondary command will stay where it is. You have to pay command and initiative points to move those by themselves. So that was the second movement point. Now we're on the third movement point. And what can happen here is this guy is now moving to there, which again allows, I don't think the ZOI of the Third Army extends into here. Let's double check that, which I think is on one of the charts. ZOI ranges. ZOI does not extend across coastline, lake, major river, mountain, or adjacent forest hex. So it doesn't extend through, but I thought if it was a non-adjacent forest hex, it also did not extend into. Let's see, ZOI ranges are 6.5.1. One of the nice things about these charts is, despite the fact that it's very difficult to read that font because of the color of the outline of it, but it does cite where the rule is that you want to look at. So ZOI ranges are 6.5.1. Like I said, I thought that ZOIs did not extend into or through non-adjacent forest hexes. So a ZOI extends through a forest hex side only if the formation is adjacent to the forest hex side through which the ZOI is being traced. A ZOI extends into a forest hex only if the formation is adjacent to the forest hex into which the ZOI is being traced. Yeah, so it doesn't go into either. But now that I'm talking about it, I think we're not actually talking about ZOI, we're talking about reaction range, which is a different thing. Let's see. Reaction is, I thought there was a reaction range chart on one of these, but I'll go to 12.0, which is this section on reaction. Reaction rating. All right, reaction is the ability of a formation or SP to react to any movement in its ZOI. Okay, so it is ZOI and not range. So yeah, since the ZOI of the Army is 2 hexes. And Cav is also 2 hexes. The Army cannot actually react there because it's into non-adjacent forest, but the 5th Corps can react. So this guy would be moving to here. The 5th Corps could preempt that. And the 5th Corps is under the command of, let's find him here. Kirkbach. He's also a 5. So he will attempt to react, and he will need a 5 or 6. He rolls a 3, so he does not get to react. So we move our French 5th Corps into the woods north of the fortress here, and that was his. This is the 3rd movement point movement segment. Now these guys, if I wanted to keep moving them potentially to attack 5th Corps, I could have paused them here, which means you expend a movement point in place to wait so you can coordinate with other units. But our movement points for corps they only have 4 movement points. And as you can see, if he wanted to attack this hex here, the 5th Corps, if he wanted to join in an attack, he'd have to cross this rough hex side, which is a +2, which means it's going to cost him 3 to move into there. Now, oh, you know what? I think it only cost him 2 to move into that hex anyway, because he was not crossing. I was thinking he was crossing a rough hex side into the forest. Actually, that would have been a 4 movement points, because we're at the forest hex is a 2, and a rough hex side's a +2. That would have been 4 to move into there, but it actually only cost him 2 to move into there. Same as those, so they actually all moved at the same time. So that reaction roll wouldn't have been necessary. Regardless, it cost him 2 to move in there, but it would cost him 3 to move to there, which is 5 movement points. These guys only have 4. So do I want to try? So that was the 2nd movement point. So now we're on the 3rd movement point. Do I want to try to move these guys who can move into here to there, or do I want to have them try and attack the army? Either way, surrounding units can attempt to react. Oh, you know what? This guy also could have reacted, so we could have moved him up to there. The 11th Corps was also part of the 3rd Army, and the whole 3rd Army got to react, at least those units that were within the ZOI. Remember, these guys are not, because they're across a major river. So yeah, we would move him up into the fortress there at Landau. So they would all get, if I decide to move these guys to here, they could all potentially converge there, and then I'd be fighting 3 corps with only 1 corps and a cav division. So I don't think I want to do that. But we have forced the hand of the 3rd Army to have to move down here and not join any offensive that's moving that way. So that is the movement for the Army of Alsace. And now I decide, I think I've got 4 initiative points left, but still quite a few command points. I've used up most of my secondary. I'm down to 1 secondary command point, but I still have 5 discretionary command points. And then still 4 primary and 4 tertiary and 8 primary command points. So I'm going to run out of initiative points before I run out of command points. And I still have to bring on some more strength points. So we will sort through that and come back for another recap. Alright, so what I did for the next segment was, the first thing I did was I moved an individual. I brought a strength point on, because you have to bring on at least 1 strength point every action phase when you have, for your initiative portion of the action phase. You have to bring on at least 1 strength point, not including the free strength point that the guy who wins initiative gets to bring on. So the first thing that I did after our last movement of the Army of Alsace was to move the 12th Corps. They were way back here under the tertiary command, back at Chalon-sur-Marne, I guess, in my butchered French. I moved them. Single corps was one command point, 1 IP, so I spent a tertiary command point and an initiative point and moved them via rail movement. Okay, maybe not that way. I'm not sure what that is. I'll have to look that up. That must be some rule or later thing, the rail from Verdun to Metz. But I could still take the rail this way to Strasbourg, which area lies left empty, and these Prussian divisions could potentially have run over and snagged it. So I moved the 12th Corps into Strasbourg Fortress. Then I spent my last 2 command points and 3 primary command initiative, or my last 2 initiative points and 3 primary command points to move the Army of the Rhine from here up to here. I also moved the Imperial Guard from the Metz Fortress up to here as well. First thing I did was use rail movement to use a movement point to move them up to this fortress here at Thionville, and then moved the Army plus 2nd Cav Division plus Napoleon III to here, and then for the 2nd command point, everybody piled into this hex. I should point out here that I don't know what I'm doing. I don't remember exactly how the Franco-Prussian War opened, except to know that the French armies ended up getting isolated and surrounded, which is exactly what the Prussians wanted to do. So they got isolated, surrounded, and destroyed. Napoleon III got captured, and the whole thing collapsed, and they ran back and besieged Paris. So I don't know if I'm avoiding that. What I'm trying to do in this case is keep a line here This was open. These forts were open over here, and I didn't want this. What is this, Prussian First Army? I think, yeah, sweeping down across. Building a pontoon bridge or something across the river here and sweeping down into this flank. I need to look and see if you can move into different countries and just violate sovereign borders. This isn't necessarily World War I, so I don't know or remember exactly how countries like Luxembourg or Belgium were handled, because Belgium's also on the map over here, different colored, got a clear border. So I haven't actually finished the rules yet, so I know there's diplomatic rules. They're like the last thing in the rule book. So I'm up to the combat rules, because I've been through the reaction rules now, so I need to read up on the combat rules, especially because I'm likely going to have combat here in the Prussian initiative phase. So we will be back with the Prussians.